Thank you so much for joining me here today for our GMAT Club MBA Spotlight. For those of you who might just be joining us for the first time today, this is the second MBA Spotlight that GMAT Club has done. There have been over 10,000 registrants to get information and hear directly from admissions officers and from current students what to know about in the MBA admissions process. So I am Maria Wich-Vila. It is so nice to meet you. I'm an HBS alumna and the founder of Applicant Lab, a social enterprise that is leveling the playing field in MBA admissions. You don't need to pay for an expensive admissions consultant. You can use Applicant Lab instead. And with me today are Bruce, Jonathan, and Divya from the Yale School of Management. So let's have each one of them go through and introduce themselves before we get started.
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off. I'm Bruce DelMonico, Assistant Dean for Admissions at the Yale School of Management. Maria, thrilled to be here, thrilled for you to have you host us, and thrilled to share some information about the school, and look forward to the next hour.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Jonathan. I am a second-year MBA here at Yale SOM. Grew up in New York, born and raised, did an undergrad business degree, and was running a women's fashion company in New York prior to coming to SOM. Involved in a number of different clubs on campus, whether that's startup and entrepreneurship, general management, Jewish Students Association, as well as a senator in the GPSS, which is our Graduate and Professional School Student Senate. So can talk about any of that as we get into things.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. I am also a second-year student at the Yale School of Management. I am from New Delhi, India, and prior to coming here, I was working with Teach for India, which is a nonprofit organization in education. Similar to Jonathan, I'm involved in so many different clubs at SOM, but I think the top two ones that I'm most involved with are Net Impact Club and the Economic Development Club. For the summer, I interned with a social impact consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. called 20 Degrees. And after graduation, I'm really excited to go back into the sphere of economic development.
All right, excellent. Well, with that, we are going to kick things off with Bruce. So start sharing your screen when you're ready. All right. Sorry, Bruce, I think you put yourself on mute, and I cannot unmute you. I'm not allowed to override it. All right.
I did do that. I apologize. My technological savvy at work there. Can you hear now? Hopefully you can hear and see the screen.
We're good.
Great. So great. Thanks so much. So I would love to just give a quick overview of the Yale School of Management and some I think key features of the school, and I think some aspects that would be relevant to those of you who are considering studying with us here at Yale. Hopefully just a quick 10 minutes. I want to make sure we save as much time as possible for Jonathan and Divya and to answer all the questions you have. But briefly, just when we talk about the Yale School of Management, we always start with the mission, which is to educate leaders for business and society. It's a very broad mission, has a lot of implications, and it means a number of different things. But really at core, I think it means that we have a very sort of broad multi-sector approach to management. We're not just trying to educate leaders for the private sector, but for the nonprofit and public sectors as well. And really to, for leaders who can think about spanning the sectors in some meaningful ways. I really think that our students and our graduates care about the kind of impact they can have on their organizations and their communities, and not really not really focused on sort of the benefits they can accrue just themselves, but really kind of the broader impact they can have more generally. So that's a little bit of what the mission means, and maybe we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. Here at Yale, there are a number of ways in which that mission manifests itself, and as a student, how you will kind of live that mission, both at school and then beyond. I'd like to highlight just a couple key things. One is that we feel we're the most integrated business school to our home university. We feel we are the most global U.S. business school, and we feel as though we're the best source of elevated leaders across all regions and sectors. And I want to talk a little bit about what those things mean. And again, these are things that Jonathan and Divya hopefully will have a chance to talk a little bit about more in depth and from their own personal experiences after I give my short talk. So first, being integrated with Yale, there are business schools can have a number of different postures. Some are sort of standalone business schools, meaning they don't really interact with their university. either because they don't have a university that they're connected with, or because they just don't interact with the larger institution. At Yale, we're very much at the other end of the spectrum. We try to be very, very sort of integrated, very woven into the fabric of the university. I think that's the case for all the graduate and professional schools. What that means is that as a student at Yale, we are talking about our 2-year MBA curriculum. The first year is the core, the second year is electives. You can take those electives, for example, anywhere at the university without limit. So not the whole university is open to you academically. You can take courses at the law school, at our environment school, public health, international affairs, even Yale College. And I think that's really meaningful because it allows you to tailor your education to suit your interests. In addition, outside of the academics, there are lots of organizations and activities that span the university. Jonathan mentioned being part of GPSS, which is sort of the Graduate Student Senate. So that's an organization that really works across the university. There are the Schwartzman Center, for example, will be, as another example, will be opening in this upcoming year, in January, I think 2021, and that will be a hub for activity across the university. Sci-City, the Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale, is another example. It's an entrepreneurial hub that sits across the university. So there are lots of these opportunities. And then one other thing I would point out is, as an alumnus or alumna, the entire university alumni network is open to you. So if you graduate from Yale SOM, you have the Yale SOM alumni network, which is very short, powerful, very highly networked. But you also be able to connect to the rest of the university's alumni network, Yale College, the law school, again, environment school, medicine, across the board. So I think that's another important feature of the Yale experience. In addition to our integration with the university, we also feel that we're the most, it says distinctively global, but really the most global U.S. business school. Right now, given the pandemic and given the fact that a lot of things like this event and a lot of our other events are happening remotely, connecting globally takes on maybe a different format than it had previously, or that will in the future. But it's still incredibly important, and there are actually ways in which our curriculum tries to address being global in a virtual context, including a core course called Global Virtual Teams that is specifically devoted to working on teams that are dispersed geographically and working in a virtual setting. Beyond that, though, I would like to point out a couple things about our global posture. We are a founding member of the Global Network for Advanced Management. It's 30+ top business schools across the globe, and that provides opportunities to connect with peers, on all continents, and really allows you to broaden your exposure and broaden your mindset as you're thinking about having a career that probably will be very global in nature, regardless of whether you're kind of situated within a particular country and mostly focused inwardly. You'll be influenced by forces that are global, and you'll also be connecting globally at some points, if not, to various degrees. Because of that global focus, we have what we call a global studies requirement here at the Yale School of Management, which means that every student needs to complete one of a menu of opportunities that exists across the curriculum. And I will talk, there are 5 listed here. I will talk just briefly about them. The first is our international experience course, which we've had for a long time. I think we're the first schools to require international experience of their students. That's a core course. Initially, it's now an elective. That's you going with a group of 20 or so students, classmates, to a destination around the globe with a faculty who's leading the trip. The next 2 opportunities, Global Network Week and Global Network courses. Those are flow from and stem from the Global Network for Advanced Management that I mentioned, and that's opportunities to take courses either physically in person or virtually with members of the students from the other Global Network schools. Divya and Jonathan may be able to talk a little bit about their global experiences in their time here at SOM. Obviously, those opportunities have been altered given the pandemic, but we're still working on ways to try to make those opportunities available to our students in the time before, until things return more to normal. We also have some experiential courses. Number 4, the Global Social Entrepreneurship courses, and those are opportunities to do consulting projects with clients around the globe. There's a course dedicated to India. There's another course, Global Social Enterprise. where the students will choose each year which course, which country they will do the consulting work in. And then we do have a semester-long exchange program that is for those of you who are looking for something a little more extended. A lot of these opportunities are meant to be more modular, more snackable, as it were, so they don't disrupt your course of study at Yale SOM. But if you do want to spend a longer amount of time in a exchange program, that opportunity does exist as well. And then the last feature I'd like to talk about is our position to educate elevated leaders across all regions and sectors. And I think that really speaks to our integrated curriculum. It's something that we're known for. Those of you who are watching now might know varying amounts about it, but really the idea behind our integrated curriculum is we kind of took the traditional MBA curriculum and reoriented it. And so instead of teaching courses along functional silos, which is how the traditional MBA curriculum is structured, we work kind of orthogonally across functions to teach you based on perspectives. And these are the perspectives that you'll be taught in the core curriculum. So examples of the investor, the competitor, the customer. So we're really looking at not at discrete functions, but at stakeholder perspectives, and trying to teach you how to think about those perspectives and how to be an effective leader in working with those key stakeholders. And the idea is that we're teaching all the key concepts you would learn in any other core curriculum, but they're organized differently. They're organized according to that stakeholder perspective to be much more interdisciplinary, much more integrated, and allow you to think in a much broader and more interdisciplinary way. So the example that's given here is sourcing and managing funds, which is this kind of the CFO function. And at SOM, it's not just about finance, but includes strategy, operations, accounting, really a whole range of disciplines. For this reason, there's team teaching that takes place. So there's no one person who knows finance, strategy, operations, accounting. We have multiple faculty members who will teach those courses, and sometimes from not outside of SOM, but across the university. Another example I give in addition to sourcing and managing funds is the customer class, which takes the place of a traditional marketing class. And when you think about a marketing class, it's about learning the 4 Ps, and it's sort of discrete, functionally oriented class. The customer class, as I mentioned, sort of cuts across the functions and includes not just the 4 Ps, the sort of the marketing piece, but also finance and operations and technology and organization behavior and all aspects of an organization that need to work together to influence and hopefully satisfy the customer experience. So that's how our integrated curriculum reorients the material that you would learn elsewhere and tries to create a more integrated and I think more responsive learning environment for students who are going to go into a different professional workplace than existed 40, 50 years ago when the traditional MBA curriculum was first came to be. So I think it's a good bit about the integrated curriculum. We can talk more about that. The one last thing I would talk about is, I mentioned, the things I've mentioned so far have to do with the academic experience, which is obviously very important, but obviously the community is a key component to the Yale SOM experience. And I think that's, integral to how we do things and what your life will be like here at Yale. And I think that's for that reason, I think it's important to maybe hear more about what that community features like and hear from Jonathan and Divya, and maybe open it up for questions, Maria, to talk more about that. I'm happy to sort of end my presentation here. Have you maybe take over and maybe we can get some questions. I'm happy to answer questions that have to do with the admissions process or other aspects of the experience, but certainly would love to have Jonathan and Divya share what their experience has been like here at Yale. So happy to sort of end there and look forward to talking more about the questions you have.
All right, excellent. Thanks so much, Bruce, for that excellent overview. So let's jump right into some of those questions. I think for the students, I'd like to ask, what's been the most impactful takeaway from these integrated core courses? The integrated core really is a unique and mind-blowing benefit, I think, to attending Yale. I think it's such a unique and useful way to study business. So can you share with me maybe like what was like your favorite moment from an integrated core type of class, from looking at it from these different angles, or any sort of mind-blowing moment that you can share with us?
Sure. Divya, would you like to take that, or would you like me to?
Either way works. I can go first.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
ladies first. Divya, go first.
I think for me, my biggest concern was I was coming from a nonprofit background, and each of these different concepts, I didn't know how I'd be able to piece them together to sort of build an understanding of how organizations can be effectively run. But the most mind-blowing thing for me was how each of these different courses sort of drew upon each other's learnings. So whatever we were learning, say, in the customer perspectives class was actually picked up and built upon in the competitors perspective class, or something we'd done earlier on in another class, like how Bruce mentioned, for sourcing and managing funds, how we picked up concepts from accounting and economics. They were all sort of pieced together. And for me, in that sense, it was really valuable to see how an organization is so much more than thinking about just the bottom line or just, okay, what kind of products are we producing? It's about thinking through every single stakeholder's perspective and how that can sort of drive impact in so many different ways. And I guess that just was really mind-blowing for me.
I agree. John, how about you?
Yeah, I think that my background, having ran a business for about 7 years, sort of lended itself toward experiencing the core raw methodology in a different, slightly altered way and in a little bit more of a unique way. And so how I would sort of describe the nature of, my learning of the program so far is more so that I think a lot of these subjects and materials can be one-dimensional if you're experiencing them from a certain place as a professional. So perhaps your experience of marketing is, simply on the advertising side, or your experience of investing is simply on the financing and funding side and not necessarily on the accounting side or, the fundraising side. And so I think that from that standpoint, the program lends itself toward giving you a 360-degree look into each of these core subject matter areas in a much more comprehensive way than you'd otherwise get through experience, which is something that also drew me to SOM and is a big, it's obviously a big component of the program. So I don't know that there's a mind-blowing moment per se. I think it's more that your eyes are open to these other areas of each of these different subjects in a way that might otherwise not be possible.
Yeah, right. Because in real life, business doesn't happen in a silo or just the finance people are by themselves, not thinking about the other departments and everything is integrated. And so to teach it as your pedagogy, I think is really cool. Bruce, I've got, as you can imagine, there are a ton of questions for admissions specifics. So do you guys expect the application pool to differ because of COVID? You may not be sharing numbers right now, but are you seeing an increase in applications? Anything you can share with us in terms of how things are different this year from admissions perspective?
Yeah. So we passed our first application round deadline so far. Applications are up, and I think other schools, from my talk to, most schools have seen something similar. So I think that's been a trend. I don't know if we'll see if that continues through the through the second round and the rest of the season, but so far at least that's been the case. In terms of the demographics, so the profile, it's been largely similar. We've actually seen an increase. We've been up across all elements of the pool. We've actually seen more of an increase domestically than internationally. I don't know if that's shared at other schools, and really, I think a record number right now of sort of women and underrepresented students of color, which is great to see for the pool. I think one thing I would point out, when people hear numbers are up, they're thinking, oh, it's going to be too competitive. I note that we were up maybe 8% last year overall, but the previous 2 years, like a lot of schools, we'd been down. So we're coming down from a peak and then kind of building back up again. So we're on pace. We're in range application-wise where we have been in the past few cycles. I think that some people hear up and they think, I think I've heard at least that people are worried about, there not being seats or it's being too competitive, but it's within the range of what we've seen in the last few years.
And the international downturn is I think consistent across schools. I think it's because of a lot of the uncertainty with a certain election. I don't know if you've heard, but we're having an election here pretty big deal. And so I think that maybe, and also with COVID, right? If I get in, will I even be able to attend? So it's not you guys, it's pretty much, it's all of you. All right, the students, how has the school helped you with your career search? Were you doing, Divya, you mentioned that you went to a sort of economic development consulting firm, social impact consulting firm, if I wrote that down correctly. And so was that like an on-campus recruitment, or were you networking and knocking on doors? How did you get that? And then John, I'll ask you the same question.
It was a bit of both. So we have a career development office at SOM that supports students with recruitment. Most companies sort of come through the career development office and do their presentations or have these networking opportunities with students. And this is particularly common for the sectors where recruitment is in a way more aligned and structured. But the process that I chose was for a sphere where recruitment is very unstructured. Each firm has its own interview process, its own application deadlines. So in that sense, the CDO was definitely helpful for me to just build my own story and set me up for interviews, or even to how I can network effectively with people, were some of the skills that the CDO, which is Career Development Office for short, helped me with. However, what really helped me was my association with the professional clubs that were aligned with my career goals that I already mentioned, the Net Impact Club and the Economic Development Club. They host a lot of opportunities in terms of webinars, panels, conferences where we get to meet people from the field and build those relationships with them, which sort of help us later on. And I think those were some of the relationships I built through those various experiences that I was able to tap into to explore how I can get these opportunities.
Great. Jonathan, same question for you. I don't know, did we touch upon your career goals earlier? Are you going to continue in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I didn't mention that. So I was running a fashion business that was owned by a family, and it wasn't my family. So my intention for coming into the MBA was to either start or acquire a business after school. And so, there's obviously a lot of resources in and around the Yale community, not just at SOM, but also at Yale University more broadly that we have access to. Dean DelMonico mentioned the Sci-City and other things. So, I am still on that track. That being said, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a co-president of the general management and startup clubs. And through the general management club and through the efforts of the career development office, landed an internship this summer with a company called Amphenol, which is one of the world's largest manufacturers of electronic components for aerospace, commercial transportation industries, which is actually based in Connecticut. So I interned with their M&A team, and there's no question that coming to SOM gave me the opportunity to explore and ultimately intern with this firm, which heavily recruits out of SOM and 2 other programs. So, my experience of the CDO and sort of the career component of the school management has been, diverse in terms of, looking at the track of startup and entrepreneurship. And at the same time, I've experienced sort of the other elements and didn't follow some of the more traditional routes like a consulting or banking or some of the other paths that were mentioned.
Well, so if you're trying to acquire a business via a search fund, I can tell you that it might be a difficult road, but stick with it. I have a friend. Yep. I have a friend who did it, and it was a real hard couple of years, and now he's doing pretty well.
We're very. I will say we're very fortunate here to have Professor AJ Wasserstein, who is really one of the gurus in the search fund space outside of the folks at Stanford and HBS, and he's building out that curriculum here in a pretty significant way. So if people are interested in that, it's a good place to come for that.
I recommend that people do it. I wish I would have. My friends who have done it, it's worked out for them, and I wish I would have done it too. Okay, so this one's over. This one's over for Bruce again. How do you choose people who are accepted? And does this mission to educate leaders for business and society, how, if at all, does that play into your admissions selection process?
Yeah, so sort of the It's a great question, kind of a $64,000 question. I'd like to touch on a few things. One, how we choose students who are accepted. We're looking at a lot of the same things that other schools are looking at in terms of sort of academics and professional experience and testing. I think those are, we have our essay to describe your biggest commitment and, recommendation letter. So a lot of the same data points that we're looking at, that other schools are looking at. We do have a couple that are I think, a little more unique, and I think they do feed in some way to the mission. We are trying to bring in students who will live the mission and will fulfill the mission both at the school and beyond. We don't presume to sort of be all seeing and all knowing. So I think I do push back when people talk about, especially admissions officers talk about how they're looking for fit. I tend to find that that's kind of a dangerous thing. It's kind of this conclusory language that people use. I think that will allow their sort of biases and preferences to seep in. So we try to get away. We don't talk about fit, but we talk about certain behaviors and certain things we're looking for that are more concrete and I think more consistent across applicants. And so when we talk about the mission, we were looking for students who will fulfill the mission, as I said. Some of that is a matching process. So we educate candidates about what our mission is and what our values are. And for people for whom that resonates, that's you'll see Jonathan, you'll see Divya, you'll see other students who are mission oriented and come here. I try not to do too much on the selection side to kind of sort for fit, because again, I think that can be very kind of squishy and allow for us bias to creep in. But we do certain aspects of the mission that we do care about are bringing people who are broad-minded and intellectually curious. And have that sort of breadth of perspective that we think is sort of relevant to and resonates with the mission. And so we can look at that in your academic experience in terms of, to the extent you have choices about your course of study, how that's played out in terms of your professional experience, if there are ways in which you've tried to sort of broaden your role or broaden the kind of work you do. Those can speak to the kinds of values that we care about. And then we also do, beyond the traditional metrics that we talked about in terms of sort of academics and professional experience and testing, we do have video questions and a behavioral assessment that are unique to our process here at SOM. A couple other schools do video questions as well, but the behavioral assessment that we've partnered with ETS on that really tries to get beyond sort of grades and scores and look at it more of what we it's not really EQ, but it's a sort of soft skills assessment in some sense. Really more of a non-cognitive assessment to try to get insights into secondary and tertiary traits that would help make you a successful student here and then after you graduate. So a bit of a long-winded answer. I apologize.
Bruce, you have ESP because the behavioral assessment, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, which I probably am, but you guys were trialing the behavioral assessment sort of on a pilot basis in the past, and then this year I believe every applicant has to fill it in. So this is created whenever anything is unknown, it creates some anxiety. So there's been a lot of anxiety around the behavioral assessment. Are you able to share a little bit more about what is the behavioral assessment? What is it like? Yeah. Is it a series of questions, or do they stare into my soul, or what do you guys do?
Yeah, that's so soul stare. Yeah, exactly. That's what it. It's interesting. So we've this, I think, is this the second year we've rolled it out to the full.
It may be the second year.
Before that, it was just interviewees, and before that, it was like a round 3, and then we actually piloted internally with students. So the way this came about is this assessment was a tool that was developed by West Point for officer development. And for a short time, Tom Kolditz, who used to lead the leadership program at West Point and helped develop this tool, led our leadership development program here at Yale. That instrument was actually sold to ETS. And while Tom was here and ETS had this instrument, we piloted it to our students. So this has been over the last half dozen or more years. We've been doing this to try to gather data and get comfort in the predictive validity. And so now, in the last couple of years, we've actually been able to roll it out fully to our applicant population. What the test is, it's It takes about 20 minutes to complete. It's a 120 item forced choice instrument, which and what that means is you will get, and Jonathan and Divya perhaps can speak to it. You will get 120 pairs of statements that could describe a person. Some are positive, some are negative. It's like I keep a very neat desk, or I'm always 10 minutes early to meetings, or I'm always, I like to, I like to have lots of unstructured time, or whatever it is. And you choose which one is most like you, and it could be positive, it could be negative, and then it's adaptive, and it will then over this 120 questions will create a sort of a non-cognitive profile of you, and we use that as part of our evaluation on top of the sort of more cognitive-based indicators such as grades and test scores to get a fuller picture of you. And the goal, frankly, is to allow us to be more inclusive and more broaden the base of students we bring in, so we're not so beholden to grades and scores, which are a very narrow indicator of just your first year performance at SOM. They don't really predict second year, let alone post MBA, post MBA performance. And so the idea is to really get beyond sort of just grades and scores and really broaden the base of the kind of metrics that we're looking at. I will say for those, it can be anxiety-inducing, or seem like it's something to be anxious about. And Jonathan and Divya can talk about their experience, but the idea is that it's not going to be. We've started out early on with a very light touch, and we've kind of gently tried to incorporate into our evaluation process, so we're not leaning on it too heavily, or more so, because we are every year trying to validate it and trying to get more refined in terms of how we're using it to predict performance at SOM and ideally beyond.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. Now for the students, Divya and Jonathan, in terms of the integration with Yale, have you pursued other classes outside of the SOM or other opportunities? And can you tell me a little bit about those? Divya, let's start with you if this applies to you.
Yeah, I'm actually taking 2 classes this semester outside of SOM. They're both undergraduate classes, so it's really exciting because we can take both graduate and undergraduate courses. One is with the computer science department, and that's a course we do with Harvard as well. It's a pretty well-known course. So that's one I'm taking. Another one I'm taking is in philosophy. That's also pretty interesting. So I was trying to keep this semester holistic in terms of the different kinds of skills and experiences that I'm building. But other than these electives, I think a lot of centers at Yale also have opportunities for us to engage with them either on a short-term basis or a long-term basis. So one center that Bruce had mentioned earlier, the SCI Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale, I am actually taking an intensive course with them. So an intensive is a course that happens over a period, and you have 3 to 4 sessions as a part of that course. I'm taking one on storytelling with spreadsheets, which is about using financial models to build a story for your organization. So in that sense, I feel like the whole integration with the Yale aspect really plays out. I know friends who are taking courses at the Jackson Institute of Global Affairs, or friends who are taking courses with the School of Arts and Sciences. So in that sense, I think whatever is of interest to us is very easily accessible across the university.
That's great. I love the philosophy class in particular. Jonathan, are you taking classes elsewhere at Yale?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Divya did an outstanding job at sort of sharing the opportunity to either collaborate or take classes outside of SOM. I'm currently not taking any classes outside of SOM by choice. Might be taking some in the spring. We'll see. There's a lot of stuff that I wanted to do at SOM, and I've gotten involved outside of SOM with Sci-City and some of the other organizations, specifically focused on growing and building the entrepreneurial community and the collaboration that exists between SOM and the rest of the university and the alumni network. So that's sort of how I've dedicated myself outside of SOM. But yeah, again, I think Divya did an outstanding job, and there's just really, you can do and get involved in any part of the Yale community, which I think everyone knows is a big draw to this program. And it's something that does exist and something you can very easily attain once you're here.
All right, great. Well, yeah, you're certainly, it certainly sounds like you are committing your time in a very worthwhile way, one that will certainly benefit future students that come after you. So you are living the mission.
Hopefully.
You are living the mission. They chose properly.
Perhaps.
Okay, so Bruce, I can't ignore the admissions questions. There's so many. Are there any differences if you apply round 1 versus round 2? I would assume round 3 for international students may be more tricky only because of visa processing requirements. But aside from that, is there a difference between the 2 rounds? There's a lot of rumors out there that fly around. What do you think?
Yeah, happy to give some insights there. And I think every school is a little bit different in how they approach it. So this is, what I'm saying is relevant to Yale, but obviously as you're thinking about other schools, you want to get a sense of how they approach things themselves. I do think to start with round 3 tends to be a little bit different because it's a little later in the process. And not because we actually, other schools might do this differently. We accept non-US applicants in round 3, and we tend not to have a problem getting them here with visas. This past year was a little bit different, or I say a lot bit different for a number of reasons. But actually, as it turned out, perversely, because of the fact that we started hybrid and people could start online, it actually freed us up to actually continue to admit international students later than we otherwise would, because they didn't actually have to make it to New Haven for the start of school, so they could start remotely if they wanted to. So it actually was, in a weird way, rather liberating. But typically, we will admit all candidates in round 3. The chance of being admitted in round 3 does fluctuate, and it really is because it's after the round 1 and round 2 enrollment deadlines. It's contingent on how many seats have already been taken up, and in some years there are always some seats. Some years, and we model for how many there will be. Sometimes we're off, and so sometimes there might be more seats or fewer seats depending. But it's not that there are inherently fewer seats. It's just that it's a little bit less predictable because it depends on the round 1 and round 2 enrollment responses. For rounds 1 and 2, though, for us at least, there is no difference in your chance of being admitted round 1 versus round 2. We actually, every year, and I've said this in other contexts, we model for how many people we will admit based on the application numbers in past years, and they tend to be pretty durable. So we know how many applicants we think will get round 1 and round 2, and what the admission sort of cutoff tipping point is. And so typically the same candidate will have the same chance of being admitted round 1 versus round 2 because we try to model for that to be the case.
Do you find that different groups of candidates tend to apply more in round 1? Like, I think the rumors that the management consultants and the bankers, they're all in round 1 because they're super competitive, and then round 2 might have a more diverse space, or you don't really see a difference?
That's a good question. I don't really see it differently. I think there's geographically sometimes some from some countries we see more applications in round 1 versus round 2. I thought you were going to say actually sort of investment bankers, they're waiting to get their bonus, so they wait until applying round 2. But I haven't seen any trends that way. But I think the sort of the takeaway for the point about our modeling for you to have the same chance of being admitted round 1 or round 2 is just to confirm that, and I'm sure you tell this to people all the time, that you should really don't wait to apply until you have your strongest application ready. So if it's ready by round 1, that's great. But if you need more time to work on secure recommendations or work on your essay or retake the test or whatever it is, and then you need until round 2 to do that, then take the extra time. Don't rush to get something in sooner because you think it'll be beneficial to you.
That is great advice. Okay, this one's now for the current students. Bruce mentioned earlier that there's a global requirement. A little bit hard to do global anything these days. So can you share with us, how are you approaching this in the time of COVID, or how has that been changed at all? Divya, we can start with you. Or no, we can start with Jonathan. Never mind. Go ahead, Jonathan. Take it away.
I do believe that for our class, which Divya and I are both in the class of 2021, the global requirement has been waived. That being said, the school is offering a lot of the global programming, whether that's through, again, some of these terms people might not be familiar with, but the GNW weeks, which are the Global Network Weeks, and some of the other opportunities to do them either remotely or I think that there's still some glimmer of hope that something might change in the spring, although that's unlikely. But our class has sort of been given a waiver, if you will, which I believe is public knowledge. Hopefully, it's public knowledge. It is. Okay. Just given the circumstances. But again, I think that there are so many different ways that you can fulfill that element if you're looking to, because it's important to you as someone who's fulfilling their MBA and looking to broaden their knowledge base. So it's not as though they've gotten rid of all the global studies opportunities. It's just a lot of that stuff has obviously gone virtual in the interim here, and from everything I understand, there are folks who are enjoying it. I know someone right now who's doing a semester abroad with I believe London Business School, and they're enjoying that. It's remotely. Although the curriculum's different and it's interesting, so you can definitely still get elements of that. That would be my response.
Right.
Is this true that you're able to do global network weeks after you graduate? You're invited to join in future ones. Is that the case?
With our class, I still think some of those logistics are being worked out. Obviously all of this is happening in real time, and I think as students who understand that. I do believe the graduating class of 2020, had certain add backs, I guess you might say, opportunities to fulfill if they hadn't fulfilled it yet at a later time. So, I think the bottom line is that the school's doing everything it can to try to make sure everyone has these opportunities, and they exist, and it has changed a bit, but it's been, in a way that supports the circumstances for the students.
Well, that's great that they're giving you like sort of a rain check, or however you would call it, for people who are looking for that opportunity, but maybe didn't get it. All right, Bruce, back to you. Someone, a lot of people in this difficult time are losing their jobs or being furloughed or laid off. So how is that impacting admissions in general? Are people going to be penalized for it? And especially this particular person was asking if I'm unemployed and also applying as a career switcher, what impact will it have, if any?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's a common one, because obviously there are lots of people who are having sort of career disruptions and making transitions not always of their own choosing right now. And we are, I'm dating myself. I can remember the Great Recession. I remember back in admissions then when, typically we are very, questioning any sort of employment gaps, and certainly unemployment at the time of application. I think, when this happened in the Great Recession, and it's happening again now, we have to adjust our approach, and we have to be sensitive to, and I think empathetic toward people who are facing sort of serious career challenges that are outside of their control. And so we are, I think the key for the applicant. So the short answer is, we recognize the current economic circumstances, and we are sensitive to those as we're reviewing applications. I think for applicants, what we want to see is what you are doing during the period you're furloughed, and what you're doing, especially if you're looking to switch careers, whether it's industry sector, whatever, how are you doing? What are you doing to prepare yourself? If it's not, if it's maybe looking for, making the transition in your next job, but are you kind of taking classes? Are you volunteering? Are there undertaking certain activities to prepare you? And while you're furloughed, while you're not working, what kinds of things are you doing? And that's what we care about, is how you approach it, and what you're doing to sort of keep yourself moving forward during this very, very, obviously very difficult time.
That's great. Yeah, you can watch you can watch Netflix and eat some Ben and Jerry's on the couch, but there's only a certain amount there's a limit to that, and you should probably try to do other things as well with your time. For the students, although Bruce, if you want to answer this as well, jump on in. What's it like to live in New Haven? What would it tell us about it? Divya, do you want to go first? Oh, there we go. Great.
Sure. So I was in New Delhi before coming to New Haven, and it was a huge shift because that's a really big, crowded city. There's lots of activity happening everywhere. Very different vibe to it. And I've mostly lived in big cities in India. So this was my first time living in the United States in a small town. So in that sense, New Haven it's pretty small. You can walk through most of it. It's pretty quiet. It's really quaint. It's known for its pizza. Not sure why, because I'm not particularly fond of the pizzas. But it's really nice because even in terms of the balance between the town and the university, we have the schools spread out all across the town. So there's some really great buildings to look around. I'm a big fan of buildings, so I just like going around and checking out these kind of places. Lots of outdoor spots. We have parks where people go for hikes a lot. Lots of great restaurants. I guess food is a big theme in New Haven, which I'm pretty glad about. The weather is great. It's a little bit on the colder side for me, but we have like summer for maybe 2 to 3 months in the year, and then it's just cold. But I guess that's most of the northeast side of the United States. But other than that, I'm really enjoying this feel. I feel like given that how there are so many things happening in business school, it's really good to sort of, at the end of the day, come back to a place where things are much more peaceful and you can be with yourself or like just figure out stuff that you want to do around town.
Yeah, that's great. That's one of the benefits of going to school in a university town, is that you can really absorb that whole atmosphere. Jonathan, anything else to add?
I mean, the only thing I think I would add is for those folks who are in the United States, I think New Haven does get a bad rap. And, having lived here, I would tell you that it's the experience of New Haven is far different than the reputation that I think it might have, just for whatever reason. So I think Divya did a nice job of explaining sort of what exists here, and what there is to do. And I think someone just wrote in the chat about pizza. Pizza is huge here, and there's some amazing places. Although I am from New York, so I don't know that I'm going to say it's better than New York pizza. That's a separate conversation. Although, yes, New Haven's a really awesome place to live, in particular where the school management is located. The East Rock neighborhood, which is sort of outside the downtown area, is very quiet and really someone once said to me when I was moving in, the most beautiful neighborhood they thought they were ever going to live in. So it's definitely a great place, and it feels like home when you're here, and it's small town feel. So it's really great.
Sounds lovely.
If I could just jump in, I know this is mostly directed to the students, but I'm actually a New Haven native, or I grew up maybe 15 minutes north of the downtown. But I've lived, and I studied and lived in, Rhode Island and Texas and Virginia and Georgia. And I've come back to New Haven because it is, when I grew up, I think to Jonathan's point, I think there was maybe a more deserved reputation of being not a great city. It went through like many Northeast U.S. cities went through that sort of urban decline of the sort of the middle of the 20th century. But especially with the help of Yale, it's come back very strong. And it's an incredibly livable city right now. It's a very pleasant place to live. And I will, put a pitch in, not just for the pizza, but for other cuisines. But to Divya's point, I think New Haveners take their pizza very seriously. And I consider my greatest parenting failure, I think, is I have 3 children, and my youngest son, his favorite pizza is Domino's. And I think you can't, raising a child in New Haven and having that be the case is really not something to be proud of.
How old is he, Bruce?
He's 11 right now.
Oh,
so there's still time.
You have time. You still have more time to indoctrinate him. Okay, we're down to our sort of final question. And again, Bruce, back to you for an pragmatic admissions question. How open is Yale to reapplicants? Is it reapplicant friendly? What advice would you give to reapplicants?
Yeah, and we get a good number of reapplicants every year. It is reapplicant friendly. I mean, we do not have a sort of positive or negative sort of skew for reapplicants. They are admitted at the same rate as first-time applicants, which I think is a sign that we definitely look at their candidacy neutrally. We welcome reapplicants. I think on the whole, there are a lot of positive things to reapplicants, and what I can say is if you've applied once and been denied, you can actually seek feedback over the summer from us, and we can, to the extent we are able to, we can share with you some of the areas for improvement for reapplying, whether it's so academics or testing or work experience or those types of things. So piece of advice for reapplicants: if you were unsuccessful in applying to us, usually in June after the season's over, we will give feedback. So do ask for feedback on your application, and then whatever we're able to tell you. Sometimes it's just that the pool is competitive, but sometimes there's something specific we can point to. But we're very open to reapplicants, and I think the key thing, piece of advice to know for reapplicants is, we do have your previous year's application in mind, and we have access to that. So I think the kind of the needle you need to thread is showing sort of growth and improvement from the previous year's application. And so you should just kind of submit the same thing, even though we already have your grades and scores and recommendations. You don't need to get new ones, but showing some progress, some movement, but not being so divergent that you look like a completely different candidate. So if you want to go into private equity the previous year and now you want to go into nonprofit management, then you're wondering where's that change coming from. So think of your reapplication as kind of an extension of your previous application, is what I would say.
All right, excellent. It's great that you guys give feedback to denied applicants. Not a lot of schools do, and I wish they all did. So that is wonderful that you guys do that. Well, with that, unless you have any final comments, I think I will thank Bruce, Divya, and Jonathan for joining us here today and telling us more about the Yale School of Management. I learned a lot, and I think everyone else did too. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.